If you're a contractor looking to grow in the multifamily space, one of the biggest opportunities in front of you is learning how to have a more strategic conversation with on-site property managers. Not just a conversation about scope, not just a conversation about pricing, and not just a conversation about getting a job done, but what really moves the relationship forward is when you can connect a project to something much bigger. Because for an on-site property manager, a strategic upgrade is rarely just about the upgrade itself. It can actually influence how the property is perceived. It can influence how the residents feel about where they live, and it can support leasing, it can support renewals, and the overall story of the community. And when contractors learn how to speak into that bigger vision, they create a lot more value in the conversations. That's what I want to talk about today. So, how to speak to the visionary hat of an on site property manager by showing them how a strategic upgrade can actually support rent growth, community pride, and long term property value. I think one thing that's really important to recognize is that on site property managers are caring a lot more than people sometimes realizing. They're actually balancing day to day operations. They're supporting the community residents. They're managing expectations from ownership and regional leadership. And they're paying attention to not only just occupancy, but they got to pay attention to curb appeal. They got to look at any sort of maintenance concerns. They got to work with coordinating staff and the overall resident experience. So when they evaluate a project, they are often looking at it from multiple different angles, all at the exact same time. And yes, they care about execution. Yes, they care about timing and budget, but they're also thinking about the bigger picture. They're thinking about what the community looks like, how it feels, how it competes with other buildings in their market, and how it reflects the standard that they're trying to maintain. That's why this conversation matters so much for contractors, because the more that you understand the broader role of a property manager and what she's carrying, the more effectively you can position your services in a way that genuinely supports them. And when I talk about the visionary hat, I'm talking about the part of a property manager's role that goes beyond thinking about the immediate issues and looking at the future of the community that they're running. This is part of the job that asks questions like, how do we make this property feel stronger in the market? How do we improve the resident experience? How do we create more pride in our community? How do we support the value of the asset over time? How do we help this property feel current? How do we make it feel cared for? How do we make it feel competitive? And that's the visionary hat. And it matters because when a property manager is thinking about it in that mode, they're not just evaluating whether you're a contractor, they're evaluating, are you the guy that can go beyond just completing a task? They're evaluating whether you understand the bigger goals of the property. They're looking for partners who can see beyond the line item and understand what the improvements actually represent. This is really where the conversation gets more meaningful for all property managers and contractors together. It's where strong contractors can really begin to separate themselves, because a strategic upgrade, it does much more than improve a physical part of the property or the community. It helps shape the perception, and it can reinforce trust, and it can communicate reinvestment, and it can really help change the way that people experience the community that they're living in. Think about exterior improvements, everything from roofing and painting and lighting and entryways and common areas and amenity enhancements. Yes, each one solves something practical, but each one also has the potential to influence how the property shows up for the people that matter most. Prospects notice first impressions. Residents notice whether their community feels cared for. Ownership notices whether improvements support the long term position of the asset. And the market notices when a property feels current, when it feels strong, and when it feels well maintained. And why these upgrades matter? Because they don't just fix problems, they can actually support a stronger identity for that property. And when the identity gets stronger, it can contribute to leasing momentum. It can actually contribute to resident pride. And in the right situations, stronger renting performance over time. That is a valuable conversation for a contractor to know how to have. Now, when we talk about rent growth, we want to be thoughtful and we want to be realistic. We're not saying that one project automatically raises rents overnight. That's not the point. The point is that strategic upgrades can support the overall conditions that make rent growth more achievable. And when a property presents better, it often supports stronger first impressions. So when a resident feels more pride in that community, it can actually support retention and satisfaction. And when a prospect tours the property that feels updated and feels cared for, that can strengthen to perceived value. And when ownership sees the improvements that are contributing to a marketability, to asset quality, it creates a stronger case for continued reinvestment. So the value of the upgrade is not just in the material or the installation. The value is also in what the improvement contributes to the overall experience and positioning of the property. That is much more strategic way to think about the work that you're going to be doing. And it gives contractors a more powerful way to communicate what they actually bring to the table. Let's look at another piece that matters a lot, and it gets overlooked sometime, which is community pride. When residents feel like the property is being cared for, they notice. And when they can see visible signs of improvement, they notice. And when the environment feels cleaner, safer, more current, more thoughtfully maintained, that affects how people feel about living there. And those feelings matter because pride in a community can influence how the residents speak about the property, how they treat the property, how they engage with the team, and how they think about renewing their lease. So when a contractor can frame an upgrade not just as a repair or a replacement, but part of a broader resident experience, that adds real value. It shows that you understand the human side of the property, not just the construction side. And for property managers, that kind of perspective can be extremely refreshing because it aligns with what they're already working hard to build every single day. So, how does a contractor actually bring this into a conversation? Well, it starts by connecting the project to the outcomes that matter to the property manager. So instead of only describing what the work is, it helps, but also describe what the work supports. So, for example, you might say, this kind of improvement can really strengthen the first impression of the community. Or you might say, this looks like the kind of upgrade that reinforces reinvestment into the property. Maybe you could say something like this could support the image that you want residents and prospects to experience when they come on site. Those kind of statements do multiple things right up front, and they're important. First, they really, show that you understand the property manager's broader goals. Second, they help connect the work to the resident experience and the market perception. Third, they position you as someone who is actually thinking strategically, not just operationally. That does not mean overcomplicating the conversation. It does not mean making promises that you can't back up. It just simply means recognizing that the project lives inside of a larger business and a community context. And when you speak into that context with clarity and respect, your value becomes much easier to see. So let's try to make this as practical as possible. Imagine that you're talking with an on-site property manager about an exterior improvement on an aging multifamily community. Basic conversation might sound something like, hey, we can get this repaired, give you good pricing, get you on the schedule. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But a more strategic version of the conversation could sound something like, hey, this type of an upgrade could do more than just address the immediate issue. It could also help refresh the look of the property, strengthen the experience for the residents and any sort of prospects that you have coming in touring, and support the overall image of the community that it's putting back into the market. Now, notice what changed. The project didn't change, the scope didn't change, the conversation became much more valuable. Well, why? Because now the contractor is speaking to the broader impact of the work. They're showing that they understand how the improvement connects to the perception, to the pride, to the positioning of the community. And that kind of language helps the property manager see that they're not just the work that's being done, but it's part of the larger sense of the entire community as a whole. And that creates such a strong partnership and creates better conversations. So if you're a contractor looking to grow and scale, this matters because strong growth usually comes from stronger positioning. The goal isn't just to be seen as someone who can do the work. The goal is to be seen as someone who understands the property, the people, and the business that's really behind the work itself. That's where the trust grows. That's where better relationships are built. And that's often where larger and long-term opportunities begin, because in multifamily, especially, property managers value partners who make their job easier, who really support their vision, and who understand the bigger picture that they're carrying every single day. And when you can bring that kind of perspective into your conversations, you create more than just a bid opportunity. You create alignment, and alignment is incredibly valuable in this space. So as you think about how to serve on-site property managers at this higher level, here's the big idea that I want you to try and take away from this video. A strategic upgrade is not just about the work itself. It can support rent growth over time. It can strengthen community pride, and it can improve perception. It can also help the property move closer to the vision that the manager's been working to build every day. And when contractors learn how to speak into that vision with clarity, with respect, with real understanding, whew, the conversation changes. It becomes more strategic. It becomes more valuable, more relationship driven. That's where a lot of the growth begins. And if you're a contractor looking to scale by serving property managers, these are the exact type of conversations worth having. So if this message resonated with you, drop a comment. Would love to see you and what you're doing in your field. And if your business is working to grow through stronger outreach and better conversations with property managers, that's exactly the kind of strategy that we care about every single day. Thanks for watching. See you on the next one. Talk to you soon. Take care.